So, I asked a bunch of people today in my school, do you believe there is morality or only limited and less limited minds? I got I got varied answers, but I'm in an alternative school, and many of them said they believed limited versus less limited minds. And this is an idea that is talked about amongst lots of philosophers, Plato. There's lots of morality. Uh, Nietzsche. I forget his name. I researched this video. I researched before this video. Machiavelli, uh, Thomas Nagel. Um, Basically, they all talk about limited minds create morality, and I think there's a way to understand that. I think so. What I'm going to say is, I believe if you remove all understanding of morality and values that you have, and then you comprehend who that person is, or that person's mind, you have to come to a conclusion after comprehending their mind to think, is that a more or less limited mind? And I would say, for example, if you have an evil person and then you see their actions and depict them in a way that is not morality based, you would say they are a limited mind. And I think that also goes into the idea of primitivism and not the political term, but like animals. But I would say I try to avoid using the word animals for evil people, or as some would say, limited minds. I would say to the point of where your mind is limited to the point where you have no comprehension of morality, or you are actively working against common morality, then I believe you are less than an animal. You are. I believe animals deserve better treatment than those who are purely evil, right? So there's this idea uh, that Plato perceives, and it's called the Ring of Gyges. And I'm sure if you know about philosophy, you've probably heard this. It was the inspiration for it was J.R.R. Tolkien was very inspired by it to make the Lord of the Rings series, which I think is the best series in all of fiction, better than Star Wars. But the entire idea is that a man is offered uh, a man wants to have invisibility, or the ability to be control when he is or isn't seen by others, and he is given a ring that gives him that ability. And he says he ends up taking over the empire and ruling it with an evil authoritarian thumb. So the entire idea is that, and then he and this is not something that this is a philosophy Plato speaks on. I don't remember if it was Plato himself who made it or if it was someone else, but he makes an argument against that story, and he says that is not how every person is going to be. And I will build my own thing off of this soon, but I'm going to explain what Plato explained. There is spirit and appetite, and I think a more modern way to experience that, to say that, is wants versus needs. But in his sense, he says there's spirit and there's appetite. Spirit guides you to what you morally need. So basically, moral needs versus earthly wants. And he says some people, when given power, will give more into their wants than their needs, which kind of goes against, which I think, in my personal opinion, I think that goes against the entire philosophy of power corrupts. I do not believe power corrupts itself, in and of itself, like corrodes a man morally. I believe it simply just exposes who they truly are. You give a man enough power, the more he will express what he truly is. And I believe that if a truly down to the bottom of their heart, darkest pits of themselves, they are still genuinely a good person, I believe if you give them power, that won't change them. There will be temptation, but one who is one, and this is circling back to my own opinion on the limited minds. I believe someone, I'd say limited minds. I'm going to change the term to a weak mind to a strong mind. A strong-minded individual will resist temptation, and this is also a part of Christian philosophy, which I agree with. But I also don't agree with a lot of Abrahamic religion and philosophy, and I'll explain that in a second. But I'll also say something that the limited mind philosophy. I forget which philosopher who speaks on the idea of limited minds create morality thing. One thing they say is forgiveness is not saying you're okay with someone, which this deliberately disagrees with Christian philosophy and forgiveness. But what this philosopher says is forgiving someone is not being okay with what they did to you. It is simply saying you're not going to allow their evil to limit you anymore. And I think that's an interesting way to go about it. And that does not speak on evil at all. Not evil. That does not speak on hate at all. And something, again, another thing I don't agree with Christianity on is hatred is not always bad. I believe all hatred does is fuel a fire. And sometimes that fire can come in the form of more evil. But I would say a great example of that is you adopt a dog. Yeah, you adopt a dog that was abused by its original owner, and you see that dog have all kinds of trauma in the way it behaves. That grows a hatred for animal abusers. So you start a animal rights movement to help animals and get them out of abusive homes in your local area. That's a great form of how hate fuels positive things. Or let's say you hate someone in your life who hurt you. Well, that hate will fuel that desire to be better. That hatred for them fuels a want and need to not be like them, right? And I think that's something that I just don't agree with Christianity on. I went to a church. The church I go to, preaches about this idea of how you can't just say, oh, I forgive you, but I'm not going to allow you in my life or anything, or I'm not going to allow you in my family. The entire idea is, no, you need to forgive somebody and be okay with them and let them back in your life. I'm like, this is also the same church that also tells people to flush their medication, or I'm sorry, doesn't tell people to flush their medication down the toilet. Says, I have a prediction that you are gonna flush your meds down the toilet tonight. And that's what I'm talking about. I believe everyone, I go to church. I go to church for the activity because I have family who goes to it, and I do it. And I do it by choice. I don't have to do it. I'm not doing it because I'm being forced to. I go by choice, and I hear them out, and I listen to it. It's just, I sit there and I think, like, the people I'm surrounded by are philosophical zombies. And that's what I mean by Abrahamic religion does not promote the idea of philosophical innovation. I've said that. And I'm not saying that you necessarily, just because you are a Catholic or Jew or Muslim or whatever, that doesn't mean that I think you can't comprehend the absurdities of the universe and develop a morality from it. I'm just simply saying there's a very much bigger chance that the people you're surrounding yourself with and the people that you have these discussions with can't understand it. Can't understand morality on a deeper level besides, oh, if I do what's right, I'll get to go to eternal whack-off land after I die. I'm not saying that's a stupid idea, but it's like, your understanding of morality shouldn't be solely based off that. You can believe there's an afterlife for those who do good, but why is that the only reason you're doing what's right? And I just think that's the type of that's why philosophy is so important. I have this one friend who I debate all the time. We talk about politics and cultural classism and all that shit. But I never have a philosophical discussion with him because he doesn't value it. I also debate him on history too, but he never he never studies it because the religion he's a part of doesn't promote philosophy beyond what the Bible says. And I think a big thing for Christianity is you should develop. I think if you're a Christian, you should develop your morality from other sources besides the Bible. Not saying you shouldn't develop it from the Bible or take heavy inspiration from the Bible. I have lots of inspiration from the Bible. I have a Bible over there somewhere. I'm not a Christian, but I read it all the time, and I study the philosophy. I don't look at it in the sense of a Christian that says, "Oh, this is the holy text. I agree with everything this says," because I don't agree with everything it says. It says it's like I don't think you're a bad person. Same as I don't think a Jew's a bad person for following the Talmud. I don't think a Muslim is a bad person for following Muhammad. I don't say that at all. I just think you should get your moral philosophy from other sources. You should develop it in your own path, away with heavy inspiration from your religion, but it should be your own way. And that's why I'm saying a limited mind, and that's the entire idea. Because if you're a philosophical zombie, you're much more likely to have a much more limited mind. And the entire idea behind of why that's bad is because you have a limited mind. See, the entire idea is people of different religions suppose that just because that if they were in a community that solely believed in their religion, that would be a net positive. It's not. They believe it to be a net positive, and I don't believe it to be a net positive. I believe if you study Christian nationalism and other forms of purely Christian communities, it promotes limited minds. It promotes philosophical zombies who behave and exist to solely do their job and go to church on Sundays and listen to a man tell them what's right and what's wrong. And I've watched. It's been years since I've watched the show, but it's a philosophically great show. I would say you could skip the first season. It's like the first season's kind of pointless. It's just a regular Adult Swim comedy show. But Moral Orel is a great example of how if you don't base your philosophy, and it's not an anti-Christian show. It's not an anti-Abrahamic or Christian show whatsoever. By the end of the show, the main character still maintains his Christianity. He just develops his morality from other sources and personal experiences and bases that on how he can abide by the Bible and also go about modern day life. Because, and I don't think that's a crazy take. I don't think you should only get every form of what you think is right and wrong from it. And when you do, and when you have a community built around that, I can even say, not from just a fictional show, from my hometown. My hometown had, for example, in my hometown, there was where my nana was a superintendent, my grandpa was a superintendent. There were the big shows in this small town on open Oklahoma Ozarks doing but fuck what. And it comes out that and everyone's rumoring the preacher his daughter. I can't say that. The preacher is essaying his daughter. And for a long time, my uncle didn't believe it because no one called the cops. And then it turned out it was all true. And no one called the cops because that's what a purely Christian and purely one-party area breeds. It breeds those kinds of situations. Everyone says, "Oh, well, we'll just take it to the preacher and we'll discuss with him and he'll have a talk with him and he'll bring enlightenment from Jesus." I'm like, no, that's not. You can't abide, but you can't just say, "Oh, I'll leave it to God to judge him. That's something else too. You can't just say, oh, well, judging is wrong because the Bible says so. So that's so I can't do anything. I can't. Who am I to judge another? And also, by the way, the entire Bible story that says, "Oh, ye who cast the first stone," um, look in any early text or old translation, and Baptists are gonna hate this. Baptists are gonna hate this. Baptists are gonna hate this. Um, look in old previous translations, like just straight translations of the Bible. That story does not exist. Ye who is sinless cast the first stone. All bullshit. Do your research. Get a uh, old language like Roman at least, but I'd say even get like a Hebrew if you can. Get a Hebrew copy of the Bible, and translate it yourself. Translate that exact story. Not gonna show up the same. Or there's all kinds of shit in the Bible. Like for example, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Straight Hebrew translation, forgive them not, Father, for they know what they do. And you want to know who? And actually, I can't say who I believe caused those original translations because this video might get muted again. But that's like, I really recommend, if you're a Christian, you study your own belief. Like, actually open up history books and direct translations. Are you even familiar with Gnosticism, the Gospel of Judas? If I honestly, I'd say in all honesty, I believe Gnosticism is more about has not that I'm saying I don't believe any was invalid for their religion, but I would say in my mind, I understand Gnosticism more than Christianity because that's straight from the Dead Sea Scrolls. The Gospel of Judas is straight from the Dead Sea Scrolls. Like zero translation, zero hundreds of years of screwing with what the words say. It's the first copy. It's the first copy and first interpretation, earliest interpretation of Abrahamic religion that I think there's some other, but and it's a book that didn't make it into the Bible. And honestly, I'd say I get Gnosticists. Like, it makes sense. And like the whole idea is like Christians don't understand their own. Lots of Christians are, like I said, philosophical zombies, and they don't study their own religion, thinking that the upside down cross is satanic. Do you not understand your own religion? It's Saint Peter's cross. I'm not saying that it's just like I'm not saying, oh, you can't be Christian. I'm just saying, if you're going to speak about your religion, and if you're going to try to have an intellectual conversation about your religion, research it first. Research your own religion. Learn about it. Learn about other religions. Learn about what other people say in philosophy. Pick what you do and don't believe in from other beliefs. Oh, but God says we can't take the culture of any others besides the Bible. But yeah, that's basically the entire video is basically the idea of morality, limited minds, Plato's, and Nietzsche. I can't pronounce German names, but just talking about philosophers, different philosophy ideas, and my interpretation on them, and a little rant about Abrahamic religion. But this video is not going to get any views. I already know that, but